Looks like everyone is joined. So good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on such a beautiful day to learn more about Social Security. I'm John Cortale, and today we have a real treat. I've invited Emily Dupree, Regional Director of MFS Investments, to speak to us on Social Security. Emily is by far and away one of our most popular guest speakers each year. Clients rave about her after every presentation. So today, it's going to be a good presentation. I'm pretty confident. And Emily's going to be providing us with some tips to make sure that everyone can maximize their Social Security benefits. So Emily, the floor is yours.
Thanks, John. Good evening, everybody. As John mentioned, my name is Emily Dupree, and I work for a money management firm called Massachusetts Financial Services. My normal job is I listen to portfolio managers and analysts that we have around the world, and I streamline economic data directly to financial advisors. So oftentimes, John and I will meet and talk about some of the things that are happening in the market. The second part of my job, though, is I get brought in to educate investors directly. And I will tell you, this is one of my favorite parts of the job because there's just so many things that can happen throughout the course of your retirement, and there's a lot of information available, but it's not necessarily easy to digest. And when we think about a topic like Social Security, which is one of your only guaranteed income streams in retirement, so you want to get it correct, but a lot of the information that's available can be very technical. So thank you again, John, for having me. I know education is a huge part of your practice, and I hope we get to do a lot more of these in the future. So my whole goal for you all today is to make you feel so much more comfortable and confident with your Social Security election. I do want to do a couple things up front. First of all, for whatever reason, if the internet falls off on your home and my home, just hop right back on the call. That can happen nowadays. Second, when it comes to Social Security, the offices are closed. So currently you do have to either go online or call. Now, if you've not gone online and signed up yet at ssa.gov, you're going to want to go ahead and do that just so you can take a look at your statements. Most of them are no longer mailed until you're approaching your Social Security years. So you want to get a look at your forms. You want to see what that website looks like. And eventually you may have to make a phone call. So what I'm going to do to make that easier for everybody on the call today, I'm going to be sending John an email with a link following this presentation. In the link, you'll be able to click on it. You will put in your zip code. That will give you the direct phone number to call for the Social Security office in your area. What you don't want to do is call the general 1-800 number. You will be on hold forever. Another tip for you when calling Social Security is you're going to want to call it never the first week of the month. And for whatever reason, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays have lower wait times. So I'll give you that link from John. You'll put in your zip code, and again, try to call it a Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, and not the first week of the month. Okay, so let's get started. So Social Security, the first thing that you're going to want to determine is when is your full retirement age. Now, you're going to hear the acronym. It's called FRA. This is super important because if you pull up your statement, on the upper right-hand side, you will have an estimated monthly benefit. That's based off of you filing on your full retirement age. So on the top of my screen here, you see this gray bar. These are the possible full retirement ages today. If you're born between 1943 and 54, your FRA is 66. If you were born between 1955 and 59, your full retirement age is 66 plus a certain amount of months. Now, it's important to keep an eye on those because you are able to file for your full retirement benefit up to 3 months prior to your FRA. So if you were born in 1956, you got to not forget about those extra 4 months in there. And then finally, anybody on this webinar today that's born after 1960, your FRA is 67. Those are the only options. So I always kind of find it amusing that I've got 2 young boys, 9 and 7, and even their Social Security FRA currently today is 67. So we're going to start there. You want to know your FRA so that way you can match it up to your monthly benefit on your statement. The next we're going to talk about is the retirement benefit. So this is the most common thing people think about Social Security benefits. In order to receive a retirement benefit, you have to have worked for 40 quarters. That's essentially 10 years of earned income paying into Social Security. Now, it does not have to be consecutive. You can go in and out of the workforce, but you do have to hit your 40 quarters in order to receive a full retirement benefit. How it's calculated. It's calculated off of your 35 highest earning years. So the IRS actually directly feeds your earnings to Social Security. And again, when you look at your statement, if you go through it, you will find a page that has your past earning years on it. Now I'm going to come back to this slide in 1 second, but I do want to show you some of the averages for Social Security today. So there is a maximum. So for those paying into Social Security, remember I said you have to have those average of 35 years paid in. If you hit the highest average, the highest caps out at 142,800. So that is the highest. If you make any more than that, the max is 142,800 for the average. Your monthly payment, so the most paid out from Social Security today, just for the FRA benefit, will be $3,148 a month for the rest of your life. Now, occasionally get a minor increase for inflation, but that's a good number to bench off of. That is the most you could possibly get. Unfortunately, not everybody gets that number. The average payout today for Social Security for those filing at their FRA is about $1,500, so $1,543. So as you can see, Social Security is a nice stream of income, but it's certainly more of a supplement to your retirement, especially if you're living in the Northern Virginia, Montgomery County, or Washington, D.C. area. $1,500, you're usually probably going to need a little bit more to live on. But those are some numbers to look at. I will also send a link to John, which you can put in some of your earnings years if you expect to continue working longer and making more, or you expect that you might come out of the workforce for a while. So we have a calculator that lets you play around with some of those averages to give you an idea of how your monthly benefit may change depending upon, again, working more or working less prior to filing. Okay, so let's go back to the regular retirement benefit. So there is two graphs I want you to look at in this chart. The one on the left is for anybody on this webinar that has a full retirement age of 66. And then the one on the right is anybody with a full retirement age of 67. I'm just going to talk about the graph on the left so I don't have to double speak to the graphs. And what we're looking at here is what happens when you file for a benefit depending upon your age. So as I mentioned before, your FRA is incredibly important because the FRA filing is the number on your statement that you'll say you'll get for the rest of your life. So if we look at this blue graph and you see this number 66, right? If my FRA is 66, there's a 0% above that. That means I'm going to get no decrease and no increase. I'm going to get my exact number I'm expecting. Well, what happens if you don't wait to your full retirement age? Believe it or not, the average baby boomer today filing for a retirement benefit files as early as they can at age 62. Look what happens if you file before your FRA. You actually get a reduction in benefit, and it is permanent. So anyone that files for Social Security at 62 will have a 25% reduced benefit for the rest of their life. So in simple math, if I was supposed to get $1,000 a month if I filed at FRA, but instead I filed at 62, I will now only get $750 a month. So why do people do this? Well, there's a couple reasons. Reason number one is some people just say, well, I'm going to retire, I'll just file for Social Security right now. And they don't think there's other options. And this is why I love doing these seminars with John, because filing for Social Security in order to maximize it, or at least not get a reduction, is all about financial planning. So let's say I want to retire at 63, okay? And if I file for Social Security, I'll get a 20% reduction. Instead, you want to meet with a financial advisor. Therefore, you can put together a plan to get through those gap years, allowing your Social Security at least to get to full retirement age. So maybe I look at distributions from my 401k, an IRA, any other income stream, again, getting me those 3 years before I turn my Social Security on. So the first thing is, just because you retire, it doesn't mean you necessarily want to go ahead and turn on your Social Security right away. I have another group of people, though, I call them my skeptics. And they just say, well, Emily, what if Social Security is not there for me anymore? What if we run out of money? I'm just going to file for Social Security, and they do it. Well, the answer is not a guaranteed, but I will tell you Social Security is not necessarily a difficult program to fix. The problem is it's super political, right? All you have to do is raise taxes or change some of the entitlements, and that will allow Social Security the pool of money to last longer. But as you know, whether you're Democrat or Republican or you fall in the middle, no one wants to run for office saying, hey, we're going to fix Social Security and we're going to raise your taxes. So they'll most likely wait till it's mission critical. What we'll probably see is that full retirement age go up, right? 67 is the new 57. That is relatively young. That number will probably tick up over time, but don't worry, the last time they did that, they went from 66 to 67. Anybody over 55, they did grandfather in. So for those two reasons, I say before you file for Social Security, whether you're nervous about it, whether you want to retire, whether you're just not sure, always talk to a financial advisor first. You can do some planning to figure out when it might be best to file, and if anything, at least avoid that reduction in benefit. So let's talk about the other side of Social Security, though, the maximizing now. So if you look at this graph, the longer you wait to file for Social Security up until age 70, you get an 8% increase per year. That's a pretty significant number. And look at age 70. If I wait till 70, I get a 32% increase in benefit. So let's go back to my scenario. If I was supposed to get $1,000 a month at 66 and I decide to file at 70 instead, I will get $1,320 a month for the rest of my life. Now, this is still a financial planning decision, but I also want to make you aware that this is also a longevity decision as well. In order to break even, if I wait to file at 70, it's about 10 years. Okay, so that's about a 10-year time frame to break even if you choose to wait from 66 to 70. We're going to come back to this slide a couple times, but I really just wanted to give you the basis of, okay, if I'm getting a retirement benefit, how do I qualify? Well, you got to work for those 40 quarters. How is it calculated? It's calculated off of your 35 highest earning years. And what happens to my benefit depending upon when I file? If you file before your FRA, you'll have a reduction. If you file at it, you'll get exactly what it says on your statement. And if you wait, you can maximize your benefit. Okay, let me bring in another reason why I say be very careful if you're filing for Social Security before your full retirement age. And this is something called the Work and Social Security Earnings Test. So if you look at the top of my screen here, you'll see this number. It says $18,960. Social Security doesn't really want you filing for a benefit early and continuing to work. They want this to be a retirement benefit. So anybody that files for any Social Security benefit, whether it's the retirement one we've been talking about, or a spousal or survivor benefit, which I will talk about next, if you file for a benefit before your FRA and you make more than this number, $18,960 in earned income, every $2 over is $1 withheld from your check. You literally will not get your check that month. Now, it will be returned later once you get full retirement age, but it'll be still locked into that reduced rate. So let me give you a real life example here. Let's pretend I'm filing for Social Security at 62 and I plan on still working. So I'm filing early. And let's say I make $22,960. That's $4,000 over my earnings test limit. Well, if every $2 over is $1 withheld, that means $2,000 will be withheld from my benefit. If my monthly benefit was supposed to be $1,000 a month, I will literally get no money my first 2 checks. So that is really important to know if you're working, if you're planning on working, or maybe if there's an emergency, you have to go back to work, this does apply. Now, good news, once you do turn full retirement age and later, there's no earnings test at all. So if I file for Social Security at 66, exactly what I'm supposed to, and I'm making $1 million a year, no problem. The earnings test only applies to those that file before their FRA. Okay, we're going to switch gears now. We're going to talk about spousal and survivor, okay? Now, I will have this piece sent over to John as well. So if you're missing some slides, you want to go back on stuff, you want to double check things, you will have access to this piece after the seminar. I'm also going to include some extra things on spousal and survivor. So let's start with the spousal benefit. Now, a couple things to know about other Social Security benefits is you only ever get one benefit, and it's always whatever is the highest. So let me give you an example. If myself and my husband both work our whole lives and we both pay into Social Security our whole lives, we're probably going to each take our own retirement benefit. However, let's say my husband has never worked. Long as he's married to me for at least a year, or if we're divorced, 10 years, he can get a spousal benefit. So you do not have any type of work requirement for a spousal benefit. There's no credits, those 40 credits. It doesn't exist. You just have to be married to someone that's receiving a retirement benefit. So in the case of my husband, let's pretend, he's only worked a few years or he hasn't worked at all. And in his case, the spousal benefit is higher. Let me walk you through how it works. So when my husband, Patrick, wants to file for his spousal benefit, because we are married, he does have to wait till I have filed for my own retirement benefit. So he can't go in and start taking spousal, even though he's older than me, unless I file for my own benefit. Now, if you're divorced, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, there is no requirement for your ex to have filed Social Security. It had nothing to do with divorcees and people purposely not claiming. But for married couples, you can't file for spousal until the person you're married to does file. So we're looking at two graphs again. We've got our blue for those on the webinar that have the FRA of 66, and then the green is 67. Let's just go out to the 66 column in this darker blue, and you see there's a 50%. So as long as my husband, Patrick, files at his full retirement age, then he can receive 50% of my benefit. That is the maximum you can get in spousal, and the 50% is based off of the FRA. So if I was getting $1,000 a month when I turn 66, when Patrick turns his spousal benefit on, he'll get $500 a month. Now, just like with the retirement benefit, if you file before your FRA, you will get a reduction in benefit. So if Patrick files at 62 for spousal, he'll only get 35%. Now, this is very important to know. File and suspend does not exist anymore. So what you can't do is Patrick can at 62 file for his own benefit and get a reduction, and then decide to, at 66, flip over to my spousal at 50%. That does not work anymore. When you file for any benefit, for your retirement benefit and your spousal benefit, you are locked into that number, no matter which benefit you switch to. So again, it's really, really important. I always say, talk to a financial professional before you're filing, just to make sure you do not get a reduction in benefit, again, which is permanent. So to firm this up, spousal benefit, it's always whatever's higher. The most you can get is 50% of the FRA benefit. So again, if I'm getting $1,000, Patrick can get $500 a month. There is no switch up available whatsoever when it comes to spousal benefits. There is one loophole left. It is called restricted application. I am not going to go through it on this seminar because it's being phased out, just like file and suspend was, but I'll ask you to reach out to John afterwards if these two criteria apply to you. So again, it's called restricted application. In order to have one loophole option that is left, you have to be born before January 1st, 1954, and you have to be within 4 years of age of your spouse. So if you are born before January 1, 1954, and you're within 4 years of age of your spouse, see us afterwards. If not, everything you've learned about spousal applies. It's whatever is the highest benefit. If spousal is the highest benefit, again, you want to be careful when you file, and you can see your percentage up here on this top graph. Okay, let's move into survivor. So just like spousal, in order to receive a survivor benefit, you do not have to qualify for a retirement benefit. You just, again, have to be married or can prove 10 years of marriage if you are divorced. Now, survivor benefit is actually a little bit better when it comes to the benefit options. So again, you're seeing these two different colors. FRA is the blue, and 66 and 67 is green. So let's go out to 66, and we're looking at our blue graph here, and it says 100%. So the survivor benefit is based off of 100% of the benefit the person is receiving. So unlike spousal, where it's based off of the FRA, survivor is based on the actual benefit the person is getting. So if I was getting $1,000 a month in a retirement benefit, and my husband Patrick was getting $500 a month, if I pass away, he would then switch to the $1,000 I was getting. So you move to the higher benefit. Now, you don't get to keep both. He doesn't get to get the spousal plus the survivor. It's only one benefit, but he will bump then into the survivor as long as he waited to file for his age at 66. Now, this is when I said I wanted to come back from this graph real quick. Survivor is based off of the actual benefit. So think about this. Not only do I say when you're filing for Social Security, you want to think about yourself, for married couples, you also want to think about your spouse as well. If I file early at 62 just based on my needs and my own life expectancy, and I lock in a 25% reduction, if I pass away, my surviving spouse, the survivor benefit is also reduced by that 25%. Or vice versa, I do have people that decide they want to wait. Many of them are still working, many of them don't need the money. If I waited to file at 70 and now I'm getting 132% benefit, if I pass away, my survivor gets that 132. So survivor is really important and it is based on a family decision versus, again, spousal is just the FRA. The last thing for survivor, you do have switch up options. So spousal, you don't, survivor, you do. As long as you've not filed for a benefit yet, if someone passes away as a survivor, let's do me and my husband again. If I pass away and no one's applied for a benefit yet, my husband can file for survivor as early as age 60. Now they'll get a reduced survivor benefit. You can see it from the graphs here. You only get 71.5%. But then at his FRA or later, he can switch to his own benefit if that's higher. Or vice versa, he can file as early as 62 for his own retirement benefit, even though it's reduced, but then he can switch to his survivor benefit at 66. So survivors, you can file for one and switch to the other. Just remember, in both the scenarios I gave you, you are filing for a benefit early, which means the earnings test applies. So if Patrick is still working and still making a ton of money, even if I pass away, it would not make sense for him to file because his earnings test would most likely deplete all of the benefit he'd be getting. Okay, so we just did retirement benefit, spousal benefit, survivor benefit. Now I'm going to throw at you just a couple more things to kind of think about. So first, I'm going to talk about divorce, okay? We did a lot with marriage. So when it comes to divorce, if you look at the graph on top here, you do have to prove marriage, and it does have to be 10 years. So Social Security will ask for your marriage certificate and your divorce decree. But as long as you can prove 10 years, you are entitled to both a spousal and survivor benefit as long as that's the highest benefit. So let's go back to my husband and I. Let's say I'm getting $1,000 a month in a retirement benefit, and Patrick is getting $500 in spousal. If we get divorced after 10 years, nothing happens. Patrick keeps getting his benefit, I keep getting my benefit. If I remarry, the person that was receiving the retirement benefit, if they remarry, my next spouse is entitled to the same spousal and survivor benefits, as long as that's higher. So let's say I'm getting $1,000 a month, spouse number 2 files for spousal, they're getting $500 a month, and my ex Patrick is still getting $500 a month. So it doesn't really matter, and most people won't know. So it's okay if the person receiving the retirement benefit remarries, your next spouse is entitled to benefits as well. Luckily, Hollywood marriages don't last a decade because Social Security would have been bankrupt before this presentation even came out. But no, there is options for divorcees. Now, what happens though if Patrick remarries? So the person that was receiving the spousal benefit or the survivor benefit, this is where it can get sticky. So if you remarry, if Patrick remarries before age 60, if you look at this circle on the left here, this is when he would forfeit my benefit. He would no longer get spousal or survivor. He'd have to take his own or wait the year to take his next spouse's benefit. If he remarries after age 60, though, he can keep the survivor benefit. So he'll forfeit the spousal at this point. But if I pass away, he can actually switch to my benefit long as he gets married after age 60. This is the one circle where Social Security will not automatically change your benefit. So for married couples, if somebody passes away, they automatically bump the survivor. If you've been divorced and you find out your ex has passed away and you didn't get remarried, to after age 60, you can switch benefits to survivor if it's higher. So the moral of the story with Social Security when it comes to divorce is if you've been married for 9.5 years and you want to get a divorce, wait 6 months, get your 10 in. If you are divorced and you plan on getting remarried and you're 59.5, wait 6 months, do so after age 60. It can benefit you. Finally, to muddy the waters even more, if Patrick divorces again, or his second marriage is annulled, or his second spouse passes away, he can go back to my benefits and nobody is negatively affected. Okay, final couple things. I'm going to have another See Me Afterwards group. I know we're in an area where there's a lot of government employees. And unfortunately, prior to 1987, it was a little bit difficult when it comes to Social Security and government pensions. So if you're on the webinar today and you had the old civil service retirement system called CSRS, meant you would have been hired before January 1, 84. These individuals, when they got their service, they receive a pension. The problem with what's happening is they were retiring. They were going to work in the private workforce. They were paying into Social Security. And then when they had to file for Social Security, the government said, well, no, a minute, we don't want you to double dip. We don't want you to get the pension and the Social Security. So there is a calculation. It's called a windfall provision. Again, see us afterwards. You may or may not get Social Security if you worked for CSRS. Since then, it's been fixed. CSRS offset, and today the program is the Federal Employees Retirement System. You are paying into Social Security. It's called FERS. You will go from your pension. It'll be moved over to Social Security if you have worked for the government and then got your credits in the private sector. Last one. This one's important to me because I am a mother, as I mentioned before. Social Security is a super old program. It's an archaic program. The rules were set up and they were not changed. If you become, I just want you to look at this one, disabled before age 24. If you become disabled before age 24 and you have not worked 1.5 years within a 3-year time period, you receive no Social Security disability. So think about that. When Social Security was created, 24 was the new 44, right? Everybody had worked at that point. Of course, they'd worked 1.5 years and 3 years. Fast forward to today, right? Many parents parent a little bit differently, and not saying it's bad, but you often see people play 3 sports a year so they don't get a job, or they want you to do better in college so don't get a job. So many times people don't have their real jobs or even a full 1.5 years experience until they graduate college, which is in their 20s. If they become disabled before then and they don't have that work experience, you will not get Social Security disability. So I put that out there just kind of a needs to know for parents and grandparents. I think it's really important to be aware of in case of emergencies. So I am going to stop there. That was a lot to take in. I'm going to pass it back to John to take over the rest of the portion. And I will see if there's questions or you want to talk about the markets, whatever works for you, John.
Thanks, Emily. That was some really good information. A lot of information, but it was really, you was pretty concise. So thanks again for that. But I'd like to shift gears. I have some questions I've been getting from clients recently on the markets, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So a big one we're getting is with all the stimulus money being put in the economy, how concerned are you with inflation?
So, good question. I would say inflation is the one thing that keeps both our equity analysts and portfolio managers, as well as our fixed income analysts and portfolio managers, up at night, and the fact that they can drive down both of those markets. We do think it is going to happen over time, but as far as a 2021 issue, it doesn't seem to be the case right away. And the biggest reason for that is it takes a long time for stimulus packages to kind of make their way through the economy. And if you think back to 2008, 2009, when we had the financial crisis, you had those similar bailouts, and a lot of that money never even made its way back into the system. So just because the money's been proposed, inflation equals money plus velocity. So velocity is essentially people spending it changing hands and moving. Now, hopefully the intent is for that to happen. That'll drive the economy forward. With that, though, would eventually we'll see inflation. So it is a concern of ours. We do think over time, we're going to be aware of it. Near term, we're not as focused there just yet.
Okay. Yeah, we're concerned that there will be inflation, in the future, not this year, but, and while stimulus money is great for corporate earnings and equity markets in the near term, it definitely has some long-term consequences. So another question, what is your opinion of international equities right now?
Sure. So for anyone that's been an investor for the last decade, international has not necessarily been super phenomenal. It's certainly the MSCI EFA, which is the benchmark we use for non-US equities in the developed world, has definitely lagged the S&P 500. This year, though, we do think that international will have more of a tailwind. And the two biggest reasons for that is number one, the dollar decline. So starting at the mid-year last year, we started to see the dollar move from a rising dollar to a coming back down declining dollar. That is good for international equity returns. And if you see kind of the Democratic playbook, they tend to be a higher spend government group. The more money we spend, the more deficit we build up here, the more that'll drive the dollar down, again, helping international returns. So we've got the dollar we're watching. But second is actually the stimulus that's happening overseas. So referring back to the financial crisis in March of 2008 and 2009, the US did a really good job coming out of that. We dropped interest rates right away. We had all those stimulus packages and it worked. In 08 and 09, Europe didn't follow suit. They did not drop interest rates for 5 years, and they really have had this just kind of staggered return. Fast forward to now, they are doing exactly what the Fed is doing. The World Bank has understood that interest rates have to come down, right? And their rates are at near zero, in some cases negative. And they also have these stimulus packages by country, which should help bolster their economy. Now, I don't want to be so optimistic, and I want to make sure everyone's aware that we think international do well this year. I think it's still going to be difficult to compete with the S&P. It's really important to understand the makeup of the S&P today versus that MSCI EFA. The five largest holdings in the S&P, and think of that, the Netflix, the Amazon, the Microsoft, right? You know the names. They make up almost 30% of the benchmark, and they're giving 36% of the returns. If you look at the MSCI EFA, the five largest holdings make about 6% of that benchmark, and they're only giving 4% of returns. So it's a much more diversified and less concentrated set of stocks. So while this year, I don't think they compete, the positive long term is the prices of those stocks are so much more cheaper than the ones that we hear about in the US. So I would hang on tight to your asset allocation, hold on to your international. I think it does better this year than last year. 5 years from now, I think it's going to be an awesome part of your mix.
Great, thanks, Emily. And we're starting like international as well, and especially with the potential of devaluing of the dollar. So we're adding small allocations to international right now. And finally, what's your forecast for fixed income in the next 12 months?
Yeah, fixed income is probably the most difficult asset class to navigate today, and especially for those that are retired, right? Because interest rates are so low, and that really forces investors to take on more risk than they're usually used to get income, especially those that are requiring income. So in the near term, we do think interest rates remain relatively low, that low for longer, but you're starting to see the 10-year treasury back up. And as you're seeing those spurts of interest rates rise, and again, it can just be 10 basis points, 20 basis points, it's having a negative effect on your longer bonds in your portfolio. So we are allocating more to the shorter end of the curve when it comes to fixed income. So looking at bonds really from a 1 to 3 year duration, you're not giving up a lot of yield. The yield curve is relatively flat, but what you are doing is giving you a better ballast versus rising rates. So this year we think rates begin to go up slightly. So again, stay short. And then we bring that inflation conversation back, and we started the first question. As we navigate into 2022, 2023, you'll probably see a more consistent rise in rates. Once that begins and the initial fallout comes with bonds, then we can start going back into those long bonds, and hopefully we'll have more attractive yields for investors at that point. In the near term, keep it boring, keep it short, give up a little bit of yield for preservation of principal.
Thanks again, Emily. We appreciate all the insight you provided today. We hope everyone enjoyed today's presentation. We'll be posting a recording of today's webinar on our website in the next few days. Our website, again, is at cortalegroup.com. If you have any questions, please reach out to myself or anyone on my team. And thanks again for joining. I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you.